Hi there, this video is about matter, kinetic particle theory of matter, and the comparison between general properties of physical states of matter. Let's get started. There are many different kinds of matter. The word matter is used to cover all the substances and materials of which the universe is composed. Scientifically, matter is defined as anything that has mass and takes up some space is called matter. For example, water is matter, air is a matter, minerals, plants, animals, polymers, etc. They all are matter. From these examples, plants and animals, since they are living organisms, hence they are classified as living matter. Rest all is said to be the non-living matter. Now let us move on to the kinetic particle theory of matter. Let us deal with the main postulates of this theory. Main postulates of this theory are: number one, all matter is made up of tiny particles which cannot be seen with the naked eye and compound microscope too. However, they can be visualized by scanning and tunneling microscope. Depending upon the nature of matter, these tiny particles, they can be atoms. If the substance is element, these can be molecules. If the substance is compound and molecular element, and these particles, they can be formula units. If the matter is an ionic compound, keep in mind that formula units consist of cations and anions. Each formula unit is actually combination of cation and anion, combination of cation and anion. Let us move on to the second postulate of this theory. This all matter possesses space between its particles. All matter possesses space between its particles. The extent of space between the particles of matter can be low or high depending upon the strength of attractive forces between the particles of that matter. If the attractions are stronger, there is a little space between the particles of matter, and if the intermolecular attractions or attractions between the particles is weak, then the space between the particles will definitely be higher. Third postulate of this theory is that particles of matter are in the state of constant random motion. They are in the state of constant random motion. Because of this state of constant random motion, they would be possessing kinetic energy, and thus they possess kinetic energy. Fourth main postulate of this theory is that kinetic energy of particles of matter is directly proportional to absolute temperature. Absolute temperature is actually temperature in Kelvin, or temperature on Kelvin scale. So it means that higher is the temperature of matter, higher is the kinetic energy of its particles, and vice versa. It means that kinetic energy of particles, it linearly varies with the absolute temperature. Increase in temperature increases the kinetic energy of particles, and decrease in temperature will decrease the kinetic energy of the particles of matter. Now let us move on to the comparison between the physical properties of states of matter. Firstly, let us look at the definition of states of matter. Here are some particles which have been definitely arranged in a particular pattern, and we can see that this sample of matter, it is not covering up the bottom of the container, whereas in this case the matter is covering up the bottom of container and it is keeping its level too, whereas in this case the particles, they are occupying the entire space in the container. Now let us first define the solid state of matter. Solid state is the state of matter which has definite volume as well as definite shape. It is hard to change the shape of solids, and solids, they do not cover up bottom of container in which they are kept or put, whereas liquid state is the state of matter which has a definite volume but no definite shape. So liquid is the state of matter which has definite volume but no definite shape, and liquids, they tend to cover up the bottom of container and keep its volume whereas the solids, they do not tend to keep their volume, does not tend to keep its volume. Now let us move on to the gaseous state. Gas is the physical state of matter which neither has a definite shape nor the definite volume, and the gas, it tends to occupy all the space available to it, takes up all the space available to it. Now let us move on to the second property of states of matter, and that is arrangement of particles. Arrangement of particles. In solids, the particles are compactly packed, as is obvious from this figure, leaving behind minimum interparticle spaces. In solids, the particles are compactly and orderly arranged. Particles are compactly and orderly arranged, whereas in case of liquids, particles are less tightly arranged. Particles are less tightly arranged with random order. Less tightly arranged with random order. Particles are less tightly arranged with random order, whereas in case of gases, particles are very far apart from each other. They are very far apart from each other, leaving behind large spaces between them. Now let us move on to the next property of physical states of matter, and that is attractive forces. Number 3, attractive forces. There are strong attractions. There are strong attractions between the particles of solid, because of which minimum spaces between them are left, whereas in case of liquids, the attractions are less stronger, relatively less stronger. Attractions are relatively less stronger between the particles of a liquid, whereas there are very weak intermolecular attractions exist between the particles of gases. Now let us move on to the fourth property of comparison between the states of matter, and that is motion of particles. That's particle motion or motion of particles, sometimes also called as movement of particles. Particles of solid state of matter vibrate only. Particles of solid only vibrate without leaving mean position. Whereas the particles of liquid, they move randomly, and they keep rubbing up with one another, or they keep sliding over one another, slide past each other. That is, their molecular motion is restricted. They have restricted molecular motion, that is restricted and random motion of particles. However, particles, they exhibit all the three kinds of motion, that is vibrational motion, rotational motion, and translational motion. Particles of liquid exhibit all the three kinds of motion, whereas the particles of gas, they move freely and randomly. Motion of particles of gas is random and free. Free means quick. Now let us move on to the next property of comparison, and that is density. Density is the property of a substance or matter, which is actually the ratio between its mass and volume. Solids generally have high density since their particles are compactly packed, whereas the density of liquids is from moderate to high, whereas gases, they have very low density. Because of large gaps between their molecules. They have low density. Next is compressibility. Solids are not compressible. The reason is that the particles are tightly packed and there is already very least interparticle spaces left because of tight packing of particles, and this tight packing is due to the strongest intermolecular forces of attraction, whereas liquids are difficult to compress and the gases are highly compressible. Now let us move on to the last physical property which is to be discussed here of physical states of matter, and that is fluidity. Fluidity is the tendency of a matter to flow, or tendency of a material to flow. That's called as fluidity. Solids, they do not flow. Solids are not fluid, whereas liquids, they flow, but their fluidity is less than that of gases. Gases, they are highly fluid. Because liquids and gases, they can flow. Therefore, both these states, they are said to be the fluid states of matter. Now, the molecular motion of solids can be represented as that they vibrate to and fro without leaving their mean positions. Similarly, the molecules of liquid, they move from place to place. And leave their main positions, whereas the particles of gases, they move at very high speeds. While moving at very high speeds, they collide with one another and with the walls of container. If you liked the video, please do subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon so that upcoming video lecture on chemistry may not be missed. Sharing is requested too. Thanks for watching.